Hello, everybody. Welcome to Atoms. How do we know what we know? This is part one of a five-part series on atoms. We're going to be exploring how we came to understand atomic theory as we currently do today. For those of you who don't know, I am Mr. Zimbrick. We have a special guest with us today. Look back here. Well, let's see and we are going to be talking about atoms. So, in our story, we last talked about Cecilia Payne, who presented an idea to Harvard, which was essentially that stars were made out of way more hydrogen and helium than anyone had previously thought. She wrote her thesis and delivered it in 1925 to Henry Norris Russell. He looked it over, he read it, and he said that it was fundamentally flawed because it contradicted his understanding and view of the universe. Turns out that Cecilia Payne was correct, of course, and we talked about this before, but we want to step aside for a minute and consider our knowledge of atoms. How do we know what we know? And what evidence of the atom was there in Cecilia Payne's time that allowed her to make her declaration? What we're going to be looking at are three main learning intentions here. How did the idea of atoms originate? What evidence do we have that atoms even exist? And three, how has the model of atoms evolved over time? Like I said, we're going to be looking at this in 5 different parts. This is part 1. And as we do that, we are going to be preparing for a sort of summative essay. So here's the format of what this is going to look like. Your final product is going to be a 5-paragraph essay detailing how our understanding and knowledge of the atom evolved over time. You're going to spend about 1 day on each lesson, and you'll be done in no time, and your essay is going to be brilliant. During the course of these presentations, you will also be asked to stop and reflect on your understanding while also pursuing further learning. At the end of each segment, there's going to be either some reading, some simulations, some audio that you can listen to, and you will then be given a prompt about what the particular paragraph that you're going to be writing about should be about, and you're also going to be given a nature of science reflection point that will help guide your thinking and writing. And on these 2 things is basically what your grade is going to be based on. All right. Starting off, we are going to be focusing first and foremost on how did we even get the idea that atoms are present. And that takes us all the way back to this guy named Democritus. He was around in the 5th century BCE, which means about 2,500 years ago, and he lived in Greece. He said essentially that, he basically did a thought experiment, and he said, if you tried to break something in half, and you broke it in half again and again and again and again, it would eventually be infinitely small, and therefore nothing. And since we're made out of something, how could we be made out of nothing? If there has to be some point at which things can no longer be divisible. That is essentially his thing. And that the thing that is no longer divisible is called an atom, and that's what we're made out of. You could imagine, if you will, his bald head right here, and we could say, all right, we'll remove half of his hair. And now he's got this little bald patch here, or this little hair patch here. Then we remove half of his hair again, and half of his hair again, and half of his hair again. If we were to continue doing that forever, he would essentially have no hair by the very end of it. However, what he would say is that I'm always going to have one hair left, and that hair is the atom. I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense, but we're going to go with it. He relied purely on thought experiments. He didn't have any actual empirical evidence or real physical experiments to back up his conclusions. So he was purely a thinker and didn't do any actual experiments. So here is our reflection slide. This will be the end of the lesson for today. And we're going to reflect on 2 things. One is the idea that scientific knowledge is based on empirical evidence. I want you to think about, how did Democritus add to our knowledge base, and was he actually doing science? Is something that's purely a thought experiment really science? It's an interesting question, something for you to ponder. Your first paragraph then is going to be about what did Democritus and also Aristotle say about elements and atoms? What evidence do they have to support their hypotheses? We talked a little bit about Democritus. Aristotle you're going to learn about by reading in Investigation 3 in the Big History Project. Text number 1, it's labeled something like Aristotle's Elements. You're going to read through his ideas about the elements and then write up paragraph 1 that deals specifically with Aristotle and Democritus and how our idea of the atom originated. All right, thank you. I'm going to pause there and you guys can go ahead and get to work.